Hi, everybody. This is Jane and Lisa, where this is the Quantum Mystic podcast. We're so excited to have everybody here. And today we're going to be talking about polarity versus unity, which in this moment that we are recording this is very timely, but also really honestly, in humanity, it's always timely. This is a concept and a discussion that I think can be a little confusing or maybe just not in everybody's realm of understanding. But we're excited to have you and welcome, Lisa.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for being here. And I do think this is an incredible time to talk about this. Like you said, where our world is kind of become more polarized than ever. Um, and so I think it's something that's on everybody's mind. We're all experiencing that. But let's talk a little minute, Jane, about what that even means. Like, what do we mean when we say polarity consciousness versus unity consciousness? Let's start with some definitions. How do we
Yeah.
define what polarity is? What is your understanding of that?
Well, my understanding is there's universal laws and there's a universal law of, well, duality or polarity. We live in a polarized universe. And what that means is it defines two. But the two, and really there's two so that without two, we can't see ourselves. The
Right.
one has no idea what is outside of itself. It's just itself. Like if we were only us, we would have nothing to see ourselves with. So the polarity is basically the equal and opposite of the same pole. You think about the North and the South Pole, and I always have this vision of like a pole going through. I know it's not true, but when you look at a globe, it's like the pole that goes through that's keeping the Earth spinning in that rotation. And they're not separate, but they're different. They are one. Each pole is the equal and opposite of the same. And really, they're dependent on each other's existence. You think about male and female, left and right, the sun and the moon. That's polarity. Um, whereas unity, although first, do you want to say anything else about polarity? Does that feel like
Like your definition, and I thought it was really good. And I feel like we experience, like I think about a continuum or a spectrum, with the poles are sort of the extreme edges of this continuum. So there's all kinds of points on the continuum. There's the middle point and there's the endpoints. And those endpoints provide contrast, like you said, like up and
yeah,
down, left and right, black and white, night and day. We can't experience, we don't know what day is unless we have night. We don't know what night is unless we have day. We think about sort of the continuum of good and evil, or shadow and light, right? Fear and love. Like these are some of the polarities that we deal with all the time. And um, I guess the only thing that I also want to say about it is that we are living in it as humans and as part of human consciousness in a time of polarity because we're like astrologically we're in the age of Pisces, right? And Pisces is the polar it is polarity. So the past, I don't know, how long has the age of Pisces been, like 12,000 years? I think those ages last around that time. Our experience of humanity has been very polarized. So we we experience that as like, well, like right now is political parties, you're part of the left or the right, you're part of your red or your blue, or we would sort of the tendency in us as humans to sort of divide things into us versus them, you know, my team against your team. And so there's always this division of separateness, this feeling of separateness, that those things are not the same. And now we're shifting into the age of Aquarius, and this age of Aquarius is the age of unity. Like we're dropping, humanity sort of leaving this time when we've been in, really experiencing the universal law of polarity, and now we're moving into this higher level of consciousness. I feel like it's an evolution in our consciousness into unity consciousness.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really great, um, you know, and that us versus them, I think is what we're really experiencing right now. It's like the othering of
Yes.
something that's outside of ourselves, and the unity consciousness is, which is this, like you said, what we're moving into. It's like the realization that there is no separateness. And so, yes, there's still the polarity, but it's the realization that those are of the same. And it sort of offers a more holistic and integrative approach to life. And I think, you know, it's it's going to take some time, and maybe not. Maybe it can all happen overnight and everybody wakes up and there's like this realization that we're all one, and we have our uniqueness and we have our differences and we have all the things that make us, uniquely us, which is the polarity. But we don't lean into it as I am right and you are wrong,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is like the ultimate polarity, which is what's happened and why every war has happened, why religion has really taken that and created sort of their own moral compass of what's right and wrong, especially the Catholic Church. Um, and then it really has created this division, which is the like that really shadow dark side of polarity, is that it creates division, and it creates this illusion of separateness. And we see it so much in the realm of politics because it's that division between the ideologies of the parties. um, and and really it just hinders any understanding of the other person, because when you're really in that unity consciousness, there's like an understanding, and there's an empathy, and there's a
Right.
compassion for what everybody's going through, even if you don't agree with them.
Exactly. Like, I think that, when we're really in the warrior nature of humans, and so many humans on the planet have a warrior archetype, like a fighter, and warriors, I think it's like 75% of all the humans on the planet have, and I put myself in that category actually too. But, when you have the archetype of the fighter, the warrior, we're just programmed to see that other, that, us against them, sort of the battle, right? You know, the battle of the opposing forces, the force of lights, the Jedi, the Jedi's versus the Sith. Like, it's like, rawr. Like, that's how we're just kind of wired to see things that way, to see other people as threats, and to sort of the warrior nature of human. And this is just my opinion based on my own experience. There can, in the shadow, be a lot of pleasure and sort of self-righteous anger, and feeling like I'm right 100%, and I have the backing of God behind me, and that gives me the right to put you in the other category and then kill you or whatever, slay you on Facebook, you know. um and I feel like that's sort of an evolutionary stage that we go through as humans, and my hope is that we evolve out of that, and as we go through our cycle of incarnation here on the planet, we become more empathic, right? So, like, love what you said about empathy. When you're an empath, when you view things with empathy, empaths should just put them in charge. Should just vote them all for president. They would never run. They would never hold up to the process. But, if we had all the empaths in charge, nobody would go hungry. There'd be no starving children. There'd be no raping the planet. There'd be, no violence, or there'd be like this caretaking. Because empaths, who are much more wired for unity consciousness, we see, I can't hurt you without hurting me. That we are all part of this interconnected web of life.
Yeah.
That we are not the top of the food chain. We are part of something that is much bigger, that needs to be honored, right? And when we're in that place, so there's reverence, right? Part of unity consciousness is this idea of reverence. there's reverence for life, sacredness,
Mhm.
you know, and it makes me, even though things are a bit dicey down here at the moment, hopeful that we're evolving. More and more people are recognizing that they're empaths, and I think there are more of us on the planet now, and that's a good thing.
Well, and I think there's a small caveat to the empaths because you can have the compassion, but you can still have really strong ego that has like a belief in what's right and wrong,
Yeah.
you know. And if you're still saying like, well, I whatever religiously or culturally or politically, whatever it is, like I have so many, I feel you and you're a total asshole and you're completely wrong. And, I think the unity consciousness goes even one step further to realize like, um, ultimately, and people, nobody likes it when I say this, there is no right and wrong. There's choice, you
Mm.
know, there's just choice. There is no one moral compass. God doesn't care what we choose, just choose, and obviously there's repercussions, karmic repercussions for our choices.
Yeah.
And that's on us, and that's on our own consciousness and level of consciousness and how much we can raise in our consciousness. But ultimately, there is no right or wrong. And so this idea that, well, the Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong, or the Republicans are right and the Democrats are wrong. It's just like this mind numbing
Yeah.
fight that really has no end until you realize, like, okay, we are interconnected. I can have tolerance and acceptance for your beliefs and your belief that of whatever that is, and appreciation of the diversity of the human expression, whether it's spiritually or culturally, or, I don't fear your difference.
Right.
And I think I heard this I heard this term called fear porn. I was like, whoa, that's
Yeah.
it. Like, there's a lot of people who feed on fear
Yeah.
without even knowing that they're doing it. So if you're really trying, like, wanting to be inclusive of the world, you know, your values and you also respect other people's values.
Yeah. I love what you said there. And I think that's where we have to let go of that self-righteousness is sort of the excuse, that belief that you're right, you know, and that when you're right, that sort of gives you, and the other person's wrong, that gives you like the right to commit violence, whether it's violent words or actions or thoughts or deeds, you're wrong, therefore, like all the things, all the violence
Yeah.
that we see in the world now. And I don't think we let go of violence until we let go of that self-righteous anger, the polarization of thinking, and the self-righteous anger is sort of like the go ahead, like the green light
Yeah.
for, for violence. And I think as long, like, really where we have to check ourselves is when we're feeling really triggered, when we're feeling really angry, when we're feeling really like that sort of shadowy pleasure of self-righteous anger,
Mhm.
that like anonymously taking someone else down on social media, or in the checkout line. Like, if you get some Karen energy going on, we're talking to you right now.
Totally.
You gotta check that. You gotta check that. Because that's a really good example of sort of like microaggression, or not even so micro, but like this, I'm right, you're not following the rules, this, I don't know. I think it's sort of like sinking deep inside of ourselves, and really the deeper, deeper, deeper shadow is looking at the part of us that it likes, that gets pleasure from violence, from hatred, from aggression, from hostility. And then we sort of look for an excuse to let that out. And believe me, like, this is why I go to boxing class. This is why I take martial arts. This is why I do anger work, because I know that's in my nature. And if I don't have a healthy outlet for it, it's coming out in some other way,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, those microaggressions can come out in, the like judgmental thought that you have of whoever it is in the grocery line or walking by you on the street. And what we obviously know so well because we feel it is like those psychic attacks are real and
Yeah.
they affect the other person and they affect us.
Hmm.
And so it takes a really takes a level of self-awareness and a willingness, like you were saying, to really look to like pause and be like, oh wait, I'm actually part of the problem here. I'm actually part of this division. And my thought of, well, no, like I love is all there is. I love everything except for that guy, you know. Well,
You know,
no, doesn't work that way.
spiritual people really have to look out for this, right? So I got a comment on YouTube the other day that was like, you're clearly not a godly person because you charge for your services, and really godly people, I just do my services for free because I'm serving the light and you're clearly serving the dark because you're charging for money. And I was like, I couldn't even respond. I just always let those things come. And I was like, oh my God, this person had like an orgasm of like self-righteous anger pleasure in
Yeah,
writing that and casting, me as this agent of Satan,
right.
and she's clearly a line of Jesus, this person who left that comment. And I was like, okay, there's just no even having a conversation here because, but I'm I'm sure she was like, that'll teach her, like I'm sure there was all this, um, I'm better than you, and you know, I'm on the side of like there's a spiritual version of it that us spiritual people have to really, 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 really watch out for because it's insidious. And it
Yeah.
can be quite subtle in a way.
Well,
And
it can be like pretty manipulative and not intentionally, but I've heard it the term the truthers who think
yeah,
that they're, you know, they've read all the things and they've done there's a lot of knowledge and so it's very heady, but the integration of the information it doesn't come from, an embodiment of whatever it is that they're saying. Like, because if they actually were living the real truth, like if they were living what they were saying, well, not even what they were saying, if they were living like really in um, unity consciousness or in alignment with God, nobody would ever say that, you
that's
know,
right. Yeah.
and because there wouldn't be the judgment. And,
Right.
I've heard that, that it's that archetype of the prostitute.
Mhm.
And they're like holding on to that victimhood of being the prostitute, right? It's like, um, of like charging of, well, that's not even prostitutes charge money. There's a different archetype. There's something, but like that like somehow there's that mentality of like, well, I can't charge, I can't actually put myself out there and charge like a living wage or
Right.
whatever it is for my worth.
Yes. And I think it is the prostitute archetype. So the prostitute give themselves away for free, the shadow side, the light side of the prostitute archetype is like, I know what I'm worth. And
Yeah.
I know what I'm worth and I charge that. um, I,
Yeah.
I don't I don't mind charging that because I feel my worthiness. And yeah, it's so tricky. I think when we get up there in unity consciousness, sort of like I feel it like I can sort of see the battles going on inside myself. I can see, I love what Pamela Gregory says, the astrologer Pamela Gregory. She says, get up in your eagle's nest,
Mm.
get up in sort of the up in that seventh chakra or the up the conscious, like when we're in our high consciousness, we can sort of look down. So to me, polarity is like it's like looking at the sitting in the eagle's nest and watching the tennis match.
Mm.
Polarity is like a tennis match. Boing, 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 boing. I'm right, I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right. Like boing, like that. And we, if you're in the I'm right, you're wrong, you're in it. You are just in it. It doesn't matter if you think you're right or not. You just are. You're in that tennis match.
Yeah.
Even if you're convinced but I'm really right this time, that's so we have to get up there. And then it's sort of like we can observe, for me, that I experience that as disconnecting or disengaging, detaching from that tennis match. And I kind of zen it, or I'm in curiosity instead of in judgment. I'm in sort of openness, and I feel like I don't have any dogma. I don't think I'm right. I just have theories, and my mind is able to hold multiple theories, multiple versions of reality. And I think we get bogged down in the polarity when we feel like there's only one way, there's only one truth, there's only one path up the mountain, there's only, you know, and our ego gets really wrapped up in that there's only one true. I mean, I spent a lot of time as a martial artist, and I saw this in the martial arts world a lot. There's only one true martial arts, and it's mine. Like there's only one yoga studio. There's only one religion. There's only, like, no, like, and being honoring of all the different paths,
Yeah.
is where and I don't know about you, Jane, but I find being down in the sort of those lower sort of mucky, it's very mucky and swampy, those vibes, it's exhausting.
Oh my
So if I
gosh.
spend time down there, I get exhausted.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I don't know if it's because we've felt what it's like to not be in that muck, but I think, the ego gets fed. And so the ego is constantly looking for information and validation for those like belief systems and things
Yeah.
that are keeping us down there. And so, you get that little high, the ego gets like a little bit of like juice, and it's like feeding sugar, like a little bit of
Mhm.
sugar. You're like, I feel so much better. And so you can see why there's like that addictive almost quality to the ego that wants that to be right, to be like validated. And
Yeah.
so it really takes a lot of work to get out of it for sure. And the journey, um, it requires a massive, sometimes it's subtle, but a lot of times it's a massive shift in perspective. And really to be like, okay, I'm the one judging here. I'm the one who's looking for validation. I'm the one who's actually being the attacker or being the predator here.
Mhm.
I don't need to be a predator.
Yeah.
You don't need to just be unsolicited predators are, I mean, we've all been the predator, but like, can we acknowledge when we are? And that's feeding the polarity.
Feeding the polarity, no matter what side of the fence you're on.
No
Even if
matter
you
what
think
side of the fence
even
you're
if
on.
you think you're on the right side of the fence, the correct side of the fence, I should say.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
that. that
Yeah.
that's I don't know. I find it takes absolute constant monitoring, you know, and if I like lose my if I'm tired, or I'm, stressed, or I lose my um inner awareness, I fall back into that pattern. It's so natural, it's so easy, it's like effortless to fall back into that pattern. And it takes so much effort to stay out of it and to be constantly monitoring my thoughts and really examining, like, what are my prejudices, and are they true, and where do they come from, and um am I even judging polarity in this conversation that we're having right this very minute? Like, that's kind of like like that. It's constant. And God knows I'm not perfect at it at all by any means. A
Yeah.
way to go. But I do think it's worth doing, because when I am more in that part, like from looking at things from the eagle's nest, it's
Yeah.
so much less stress. There's so
Yeah.
much less exhaustion. And it's sort of a daily practice, because the news is so flippin' weird every single day. These days we tune into the news and we're like, what the actual is happening today? And then it's so hard not to get so kind of, I think, the cultural, social, the pressure from the collective consciousness to keep us in
Mhm.
a conversation is intense. Don't you think?
Yeah, and I think it's designed that way. I mean, the news, as we know, or hopefully by now, or maybe I'm the first person to tell you this, but all the news outlets are owned by like 4 companies. They can't, it's like it's designed, and also it's a business. The news is a business, they're designed to keep you wanting more. And so it's going to be sensationalized. It's going to be, the half truth, or maybe just like not even a half truth, like a little tiny chip of a truth, and then they leave out the rest. So it's like you
Yeah.
it's designed that way. And so it's about like, some people say like, jumping out of the matrix, right? It's it's that, and it's the way forward is seeing that, okay, that's true. All this exists. The law of polarity says that everything in life has an opposite. It's quite simple, actually. And that both ends of the spectrum are always present. We always will have light and dark. We will always have hot and cold, but we don't judge hot and cold. They just are.
They just are, right? It's not one is evil and one is good. They just are.
Yeah. And so it's part of our existence, and it's about really leaning, like embodying that understanding, knowing where we're judging it, and then looking at our conditioning and where we're saying, oh, well, actually, cold is the only right way. Hot is the wrong way. It's like ludicrous. Right? It's just like, what are we doing here? Why are we spending our time doing this? And, of course, it's like about fitting in. It's about culture. It's about community. It's about family. It's about acceptance. It's so deep. It's so vast.
Yeah.
And it's about jumping out of, it's like unplugging from the matrix so that we can start thinking, reconnect, like remembering, so we can remember who we truly are. And we're not separate from God. We are not separate from God. We're not separate from source. We're not separate from the universe.
Right.
And that's the oneness. And so when we really can embody that on a felt sense, it becomes quite easy. Like you no longer judge, or when you do, it's much quicker. And like you said, it feels bad. It doesn't feel good. And
No,
you're like,
that's bad.
why did I just do that? Okay, correct. And you correct in that moment. And then you can live in that sort of knowing that, yeah, there is the duality, there is the polarity and the division. And, I can live with the acceptance, that there is separateness, but we're working on about harmony and living in harmony and integration of all the separateness with
Think like
compassion.
let's end with some like concrete steps on how to do that. I think for me it's like a lot about meditation and
Mhm.
spending years as a meditator to kind of really cultivate that compassionate observer of the self, like the part of us that's able to rise above our selfness, like our ego self, and observe. Like
Mhm.
if we can't observe our ego self, we have a really we don't feel that's it just feels like that's who we are, and there's into another place to stay. There's no ego nest to get into, right? So meditation for me has been really, I think, and journaling, and like I've studied NLP, which I found very helpful for neuro-linguistic programming to help you examine the way you think by looking at your language. So there has to be some kind of examination of our thinking and feeling processes, which to me meditation sort of rolls all that up in one. But what about you? What do you feel like if we want to take some steps to unity consciousness, how do we do that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like meditation is key. It's like the cornerstone of, it's
Yeah.
why it's been taught forever. It's like the gifts, this direct gift from God. Um, it's interesting how I think one of the biggest teachers for me was experiencing an ego death. And you can't really prompt an ego death. I think they happen. They can be, it's like this collapse this feeling of like as if you've just died yourself, your own your understanding of who you were is no longer there and no longer exists.
Right.
And it wasn't triggered by anything except a conversation. It was one conversation with essentially a teacher, with somebody who was willing to poke me in just the right way,
Wow.
just knew exactly what to say. And and it was like, and so,
Wow.
that's not necessarily helpful because I don't know any steps. I know,
You
I
can't
think
like you can't dial that up and order it like you order a pizza, right?
you can't. And then you're not promised an ego death when you do plant medicine.
Oh,
There's
one ego death, please. It's not even enlightenment.
wouldn't that be cool?
I don't know. It's pretty hard. It's pretty like painful.
So not so helpful. And if you've ever had one, comment below because we would love to have the conversation of what yours was like and how it was triggered.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that when that happened, I had been meditating for, um, quick math, over almost 20 years already. I mean, because I started when I was 9 and I was in my 20s when this happened.
Wow.
So it was like that math doesn't add up. 16 years. Um, and so the meditation really does help you teach. It teaches you how to be the conscious observer so that we don't need to be attached to this personality
Right.
that we think is who we are.
Right.
We're not
Absolutely.
personalities.
Yeah. I love the ego death. That's so good. And I think most of us achieve it by accident because we go through some horrible tragedy. Like we get divorced or somebody dies or we almost die or we have a diagnosis or we some kind of like, crash and burn situation that pulls the rug out from under the external things we use to create our identity.
Yeah.
Well, and then that shakes up the apple cart pretty good. So I know that happens. It's like at some point that's happened to you. If you're
Yeah.
listening to this, I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna give it.
Yeah.
Unless you're sort of a new laid egg, super young and haven't had a lot of life experience.
Like,
Or maybe if you are super young, because sometimes we get that stuff in our childhood. Like we get the blow up comes really, really early for a lot of us.
yeah.
So who knows? It can happen anytime, but that's often the way it is, happens off the mat just in your life.
Well, and I guess also talking about the conscious observer is, we can choose to we so this is a practice of choosing to respond and choosing how we respond from within ourselves and with each other. So there's the conscious practice of choice when our sense of identity feels under threat from an opposing perspective. So there's this threat to our personality, to our identity. And it's important for us to notice the trigger and the strong emotions that we're having within, and observe ourselves and notice, okay, this is when we are having this internal dialogue of we're perceiving that we're right. This is the right way of being. We do this with our partners. We do this with our kids. We do this with a stranger on the street. We do this with the news. And then also be able to have that awareness and that inner ability to pause when we're in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, please state, and to actually just kind of sit with it and
Yeah,
not react from it.
100%. Super wise. And like I've trained myself to never say or do or take action if I'm triggered.
Yeah.
Because it never goes well.
Never goes well.
And that creates some mess you got to clean up later. And if you're triggered, you're in the polarity. And then there's things to do. Like there's stuff to do to take care of yourself and mind yourself so that and with lots of love, so you can kind of come out of that state of being triggered and quickly you know come back into that higher state.
Yeah.
So that's a really good way. Like, do not send that email, do not post that Facebook post, do not send that text or call that person, just don't.
I'll do
And
it.
we'll do it. And that would just, you know, solve those all the problems in the world, I think, if people didn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we didn't feel like our own validation of our identity and the validation of our belonging and acceptance and self-worth from those expressions, from the like proving that, you know, we're right and they're wrong. It's like instead of that, it's the embracing of that diversity and then not needing to be feel our own self-worth and value by proving that we're right.
So beautiful. Such a great conversation.
Yeah, it's a big one.
The big one. Thanks. Thanks, Jane.
Thanks, Lisa. Always so good.
Yeah. And thanks all of you guys who are tuning in and listening. Yeah, I would love to hear what you think about it, what your experiences are. Let's carry on the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.